My name is Patricia and I'm 32 years old. Most people think family should come first, no matter what. I used to believe that too, until I found myself sitting in a lawyer's office holding a letter from my parents demanding visitation rights to my baby son. They wanted to share custody with my sister Rachel, who had never even met him. You see, my parents had always favoured Rachel over me, but what they did on my wedding day crossed every line imaginable. They destroyed the most important day of my life to protect her feelings, thinking I would just accept it like I always had. But this time was different. This time I fought back. Before I tell you what happened, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button if you've ever felt like the forgotten child, and subscribe for more stories. Trust me, you won't believe what my parents did next. Growing up in our suburban Los Angeles home, I learned early that my needs would always come second to my sister Rachel's. She was 4 years younger than me, born premature at 28 weeks, and spent the first 3 months of her life in the neonatal intensive care unit. My parents, Paul and Martha, never quite recovered from that terrifying experience. Dad worked as a certified public accountant for a mid-sized firm downtown, while Mum was a registered nurse at Children's Hospital. They poured all their protective instincts into Rachel, treating her like she might break at any moment. Rachel grew up to be a free-spirited artist who painted watercolor landscapes and sold them at local craft fairs. At 28, she still lived in our childhood bedroom surrounded by canvases and paint tubes, earning just enough to buy art supplies, but never enough to move out. My parents didn't mind. In fact, they encouraged it, calling her their creative soul, who needed nurturing and support. Meanwhile, I had followed a completely different path. I studied economics at UCLA, graduated summa cum laude, and landed a position as a financial analyst at a prestigious investment firm in Century City. I worked 60-hour weeks, saved diligently, and bought my own condo in Santa Monica when I turned 27. My parents were proud, sure, but their pride felt distant and measured compared to the way they beamed when Rachel sold a single painting for $50. The pattern had been established since childhood. When I turned 16, my parents cancelled my birthday party because Rachel had caught a cold and was feeling too sick to attend. They said it wouldn't be fair to celebrate without her. When I graduated from UCLA, the ceremony fell on the same weekend as Rachel's first solo art exhibition at a small gallery in Silver Lake. My parents spent the entire graduation dinner talking about how brave Rachel was for putting herself out there as an artist. I had met Daniel Rodriguez during my residency interview at Cedars-Sinai, where he was completing his surgical residency in orthopedics. He was brilliant, kind, and had the steadiest hands I had ever seen. More importantly, he saw me for who I was, not as Rachel's responsible older sister or my parents' dependable backup plan. We dated for 3 years before he proposed, and I had never felt more certain about anything in my life. Daniel understood my family dynamics better than I realized. He had watched my parents dismiss my achievements while celebrating Rachel's smallest victories. He saw how they expected me to lend Rachel money whenever her art sales were slow, which was most months. He noticed how family dinners always revolved around Rachel's latest project, or her most recent breakup, or her struggles with finding her artistic voice. When Rachel turned 26, she still hadn't held a steady job for more than 6 months. She would start working at coffee shops or retail stores, then quit when the schedule interfered with her painting or when she felt unappreciated by managers. My parents always supported her decisions, saying that traditional employment would stifle her creativity. Meanwhile, they constantly asked me about my retirement savings and whether I was contributing enough to my 401k. The month before Daniel proposed, Rachel had borrowed $800 from me, to pay for a pottery wheel she absolutely had to have. She promised to pay me back within 2 months, but the deadline came and went without any mention of the money. When I finally brought it up, she burst into tears and said I was being materialistic and unsupportive of her dreams. My parents took her side, suggesting I should be more generous with family since I made good money. That night, Daniel held me while I cried in frustration. He said something that stuck with me. "Patricia, you can't keep setting yourself on fire to keep other people warm." I didn't fully understand what he meant then, but I would remember those words clearly in the months to come. 8 months before our wedding date, Daniel and I began planning what we hoped would be the perfect celebration of our love. We chose the Four Seasons Hotel in Beverly Hills with its elegant ballroom and stunning city views. The venue could accommodate 150 guests, and we planned every detail meticulously, from the ivory and blush color scheme to the band that would play our first dance song. The total cost came to $45,000, which Daniel and I split evenly. We had both saved carefully for this day, and we deliberately declined my parents' offer to contribute financially. I had learned from watching my friends' weddings that accepting money from family often came with strings attached, and I wanted complete control over our special day. My parents seemed supportive at first, offering to help with addressing invitations and coordinating with out-of-town relatives. Mum even offered to throw me a bridal shower, which I gratefully accepted. But as the months passed, I began noticing subtle signs of tension, particularly from Rachel. She complained during family dinners that nobody ever asked about her love life or her dating prospects. She would make comments like, "I guess some people get all the luck in romance," while stirring her pasta dramatically. When I showed Mum my wedding dress during our shopping trip, Rachel sighed heavily and said, "Must be nice to have someone who wants to marry you." The first major conflict arose when I announced my choice for maid of honor. Sarah Chen had been my closest friend since college, and she was the obvious choice. She had supported me through every challenge, celebrated every success, and knew me better than almost anyone. But when I mentioned this decision at Sunday dinner, Rachel's face crumpled. "I just assumed I would be your maid of honor," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm your only sister. Isn't that what sisters do for each other?" My parents immediately jumped to her defense. Dad set down his fork and gave me his serious expression, the one he used when reviewing tax returns for discrepancies. "Sweetheart, Rachel has a point. Family should come first, especially for something as important as your wedding." Mum nodded vigorously. "Honey, Sarah is wonderful, but Rachel is your blood. This is about family unity and tradition." I felt that familiar knot forming in my stomach, the same feeling I got whenever I had to choose between my own preferences and keeping peace in the family. After 2 hours of discussion that felt more like negotiation, I compromised by asking Rachel to be my second maid of honor, standing beside Sarah during the ceremony. Rachel seemed satisfied with this arrangement, but I noticed my parents having hushed conversations whenever I entered the room. They would stop talking abruptly and smile too brightly, asking if I needed help with wedding planning. Something felt off, but I convinced myself I was being paranoid. 3 weeks before the wedding, Mum casually asked if Daniel and I would consider changing our wedding date, because Rachel had been invited to an art retreat in Sedona that same weekend. "It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for her career," Mum explained. "The instructor is internationally recognized, and she might never get another chance like this." I explained that changing the date was impossible. We had already sent invitations, guests had booked flights and hotels, and vendors had been contracted months in advance. The financial penalties alone would cost thousands of dollars. Mum seemed disappointed, but said she understood. However, Rachel's behavior became increasingly erratic as the wedding approached. She would call me crying about how nobody in the family cared about her future, how she felt invisible next to my success, and how she worried she would never find love like Daniel and I had. These conversations always ended with me spending hours reassuring her and promising that my marriage wouldn't change our relationship. The week before the wedding, Rachel's mood suddenly shifted. She became almost giddy, talking about how excited she was for the ceremony and how beautiful everything would be. She kept mentioning that she had a special surprise planned for me, something that would make the day even more memorable. I assumed she meant a heartfelt speech or a special gift, and I appreciated her enthusiasm. Daniel noticed the change too. "Your sister seems different this week," he observed as we finished our final venue walkthrough, "more upbeat than she's been in months." I agreed, feeling relieved that Rachel had apparently worked through her feelings about the wedding. I thought we had successfully navigated the family drama and could focus on enjoying our celebration. I had no idea that her cheerfulness was actually a sign that she and my parents had been planning something that would destroy everything Daniel and I had worked toward. Saturday, the June 15th, started as the most beautiful morning I could have imagined for my wedding day. I woke up at 7:30 in my suite at the Four Seasons sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Daniel was staying in a separate room, honouring the tradition of not seeing the bride before the ceremony. I felt giddy with anticipation as I ordered room service and began the process of transforming into a bride. My hair and makeup team arrived promptly at 10 o'clock. Jessica, my hairstylist, created an elegant updo with soft curls framing my face, while Maria, the makeup artist, gave me a classic look with subtle smoky eyes and nude pink lips. I felt beautiful and confident as I slipped into my silk robe to await the arrival of my bridal party. Sarah arrived first, carrying coffee and pastries from our favourite bakery near campus. She had been my rock throughout the entire planning process, helping me stay calm during stressful moments and reminding me that the day was about celebrating love, not achieving perfection. We were laughing about memories from college when there was a knock at the door. My parents entered the suite with expressions I had never seen before. Dad's face was pale and drawn, while Mum looked like she had been crying. They weren't dressed for a wedding. Instead, they wore casual clothes and grim expressions that immediately sent alarm bells ringing in my head. "Sweetheart, we need to talk to you privately," Dad said, his voice shaking slightly. Sarah immediately offered to step outside, but I asked her to stay. Something in my parents' demeanour told me I would need emotional support for whatever they were about to say. Mum sat heavily in one of the suite's armchairs, while Dad remained standing by the window, unable to meet my eyes. "Patricia, there's no easy way to say this," Dad began, running his hands through his thinning hair. "We've had to make an incredibly difficult decision about today." My heart started pounding. "What kind of decision?" Mum spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "We've cancelled the wedding." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt the air leave my lungs, and for a moment I thought I might be having a nightmare. "What do you mean, cancelled?" "We called the hotel this morning and cancelled everything," Dad explained, still staring out the window. "We also contacted the vendors, the band, the photographer. We've been calling guests since 6 o'clock to let them know the wedding is off." I grabbed the back of a chair to steady myself. "You did what? How could you possibly have the authority to cancel my wedding?" That's when Mum delivered the explanation that would haunt me for months afterward. Honey Rachel is having a complete breakdown. Her therapist says that watching you get married would trigger a severe depressive episode that could be dangerous to her mental health. Dr. Peterson specifically advised us that exposing her to your wedding could cause lasting psychological damage. "She's been struggling so much with feeling left behind," Dad added. "Seeing you achieve this milestone while she's still searching for love and stability would be cruel. You're strong, Patricia. You've always been strong. You can handle disappointment better than Rachel can handle heartbreak." I stared at them in complete disbelief. "Are you telling me that you destroyed my wedding to protect Rachel's feelings?" "We're protecting her mental health," Mum corrected. This isn't about feelings, it's about preventing a psychiatric crisis that could require hospitalization. Sarah stepped forward, her voice sharp with anger. Where is Rachel right now? If she's having such a severe crisis, surely she's with her therapist or at home being monitored. My parents exchanged a guilty look that told me everything I needed to know. She's at the spa, Mum admitted quietly. She needed a relaxing day to prepare for the emotional difficulty of your wedding being postponed. The spa, I repeated, my voice rising. She's getting a massage while you're destroying my life. Dad finally turned to face me, and I saw something in his expression that broke my heart completely. It wasn't guilt or regret. It was expectation. He actually expected me to accept this decision gracefully, the way I had accepted every other sacrifice they had asked me to make for Rachel's sake. "Sweetheart, you'll understand when you calm down," he said. "You've always been the responsible one, the one who puts family first. This is just another way of taking care of your sister." At that moment, Daniel burst through the door. He had been getting ready in his own suite when the hotel manager informed him about the cancellation. His face was flushed with anger and disbelief as he demanded answers from my parents. "How dare you?" he said, his voice controlled but trembling with fury. "How dare you destroy Patricia's wedding day without even consulting her?" "This is a family matter," Dad replied stiffly. "Patricia understands that Rachel's well-being has to come first." "No," I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. "No, I don't understand. I don't understand how you could do this to me. I don't understand how you could think this is acceptable." Mum started crying again. "You'll thank us later when Rachel doesn't end up in the hospital. You'll realise we made the right choice for everyone." But as I looked at my parents' faces, I realised something that changed everything. They weren't sorry. They weren't anguished about hurting me. They were inconvenienced by my reaction, frustrated that I wasn't immediately agreeing with their decision. After 32 years of putting Rachel first, they genuinely expected me to smile and say I understood. That's when I knew that nothing would ever be the same between us again. I locked myself in the suite's bedroom and cried for 2 solid hours while Daniel dealt with the aftermath of my parents' decision. Through the door, I could hear him on the phone with vendors trying to understand what could be salvaged and what was lost forever. Sarah had taken charge of calling our closest friends to explain the situation, sparing me from having to repeat the humiliating story over and over. When I finally emerged, my makeup was ruined and my carefully styled hair was a mess, but my mind was clearer than it had been in years. I found Daniel sitting on the couch, his head in his hands, still wearing his black tuxedo pants and white dress shirt. The sight of him dressed for our cancelled wedding broke my heart all over again. "I'm so sorry," I whispered, sitting beside him. "I'm so sorry my family did this to us." He looked up at me with such love and determination that I almost started crying again. "Patricia, this isn't your fault, and I have an idea, but I need to know if you're brave enough to do something completely crazy." "What kind of crazy?" Daniel stood up and began pacing the suite. "Let's get married anyway. Today. Right now. Not here. Not with all the drama and the cancelled vendors and your parents hovering around expecting you to forgive them. Let's go somewhere else and get married exactly the way we want to." "Where could we possibly go? Everything is booked and we don't have any plans made anywhere else." "Bali," he said simply. "I've always wanted to visit Bali. We could be on a plane in 4 hours and married on a beach by sunset tomorrow." The idea was so outrageous and spontaneous that it took my breath away. I had never done anything impulsive in my entire life. I was the planner, the responsible one, the person who made pro and con lists before deciding what to have for breakfast. But as I sat in that hotel suite, wearing a silk robe instead of my wedding dress, surrounded by the debris of my destroyed dreams, spontaneity felt like salvation. "Are you serious?" I asked. You want to fly to Indonesia right now and get married. I want to marry you, Daniel said, kneeling in front of me and taking my hands. I don't care if it's in a 5-star hotel ballroom or on a beach halfway around the world. I don't care if there are 150 guests or just the two of us. I want to be your husband, and I want to start our life together today, not in 6 months when your parents decide it's convenient for Rachel. I thought about all the money we had lost, all the plans that had been destroyed, all the guests who had travelled to Los Angeles for nothing. Then I thought about spending the next year listening to my parents explain why their decision had been necessary, watching Rachel bask in the attention of being the sister who was too fragile for weddings and waiting for another opportunity that might be cancelled for entirely different reasons. Let's do it, I said, surprising myself with how quickly the words came out. Let's go to Bali and get married. Daniel grinned and kissed me hard. Really? Really, but I have one condition. We're not telling anyone where we're going. We're not leaving forwarding information. We're just disappearing until we're ready to come back. By 6 o'clock that evening, we were on a plane to Bali, with nothing but hastily packed suitcases and each other. I had turned off my phone after the 47th call from my parents, and Daniel had done the same after receiving increasingly frantic voicemails from my mother, begging us to come home so they could work everything out. The 14-hour flight gave me time to process what had happened and what we were doing. For the first time in my adult life, I was making a major decision without considering how it would affect my family, without weighing Rachel's feelings against my own desires, without asking permission or seeking approval. As our plane descended into Denpasar, I looked out the window at the tropical landscape below and felt something I had never experienced before: complete and total freedom. I was about to marry the man I loved in one of the most beautiful places on earth, and nobody could take that away from me. We landed on Sunday morning and spent the day exploring Seminyak, finding a small government office where we could legally register our marriage with the help of a local translator. The process was surprisingly simple, requiring only our passports, birth certificates, and 2 witnesses, who turned out to be a friendly Australian couple celebrating their own anniversary. On Monday afternoon, we were married on a secluded beach at sunset, with waves lapping at our feet and tropical flowers in my hair. I wore a simple white sundress purchased that morning at a local boutique, while Daniel wore khakis and a white linen shirt. Our wedding photographer was a local artist named Maid, who captured the most beautiful and authentic moments of joy I had ever seen. Standing there as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, exchanging vows we had written on the plane, I realized that this small, spontaneous ceremony was infinitely more meaningful than the elaborate celebration my parents had destroyed. This was about love, not obligation. This was about choice, not expectation. This was about Daniel and me building a life together, not about managing other people's emotions. We spent our honeymoon month exploring Ubud, learning to cook traditional Indonesian dishes, practicing yoga at sunrise, and talking about our future without the weight of family drama pressing down on us. For 30 days, I experienced what it felt like to live entirely for myself and my husband, and I never wanted that feeling to end. When Daniel and I returned to Los Angeles 6 weeks later, we made a decision that surprised even us. We weren't ready to resume our old life. The thought of going back to family dinners where Rachel's needs dominated every conversation, of listening to my parents justify their actions, of pretending that destroying our wedding was somehow an act of love, felt impossible. Daniel had been offered a position at Scripps Memorial Hospital in San Diego, and I could easily work remotely for my investment firm. Within 2 months of returning from Bali, we had relocated to a beautiful craftsman house in the Hillcrest neighborhood, complete with a garden where I could grow the herbs and vegetables I had learned to love during our time in Ubud. The distance from my family felt therapeutic, San Diego was only 2 hours south of Los Angeles, but it might as well have been another planet. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't receiving daily phone calls asking for favors, money, or emotional support. I wasn't hearing about Rachel's latest crisis or my parents' concerns about her future. I was just Patricia, wife of Daniel, living our quiet and happy life. 8 months after our Bali wedding, I noticed I was feeling unusually tired and nauseous. At first, I attributed it to stress from starting a new consulting business, but when the symptoms persisted, I decided to see a doctor. The pregnancy test result felt like the most perfect punctuation mark to our new chapter. Daniel cried when I told him, holding me in our kitchen, while morning light streamed through the windows. We had talked about children during our courtship, but having a baby felt like the ultimate symbol of our independence from my family's dysfunction. This child would grow up knowing they were wanted and cherished, not used as a pawn in other people's emotional games. My pregnancy progressed beautifully. I had never felt healthier or more content working from home, while Daniel excelled in his new position as an orthopedic surgeon. We attended childbirth classes, decorated the nursery in soft yellows and greens, and chose the name Lucas Daniel Rodriguez Patterson, combining both of our surnames in a hyphenated tradition. The most peaceful aspect of my pregnancy was the complete absence of family drama. My parents had no idea I was pregnant, which meant no unsolicited advice about nutrition, no arguments about parenting philosophies, and no demands that I consider Rachel's feelings about becoming an aunt. For 9 months, I carried our son in blissful privacy, sharing the experience only with Daniel and my doctor. Lucas was born on a rainy Tuesday morning in March, weighing 7 pounds and 4 ounces, with dark hair like his father, and grey eyes that seemed to take in everything around him. The moment they placed him in my arms, I understood completely why my parents had been so protective of Rachel after her difficult birth. The love I felt for Lucas was overwhelming and fierce, but unlike my parents, I was determined to raise him with healthy boundaries and realistic expectations. For 3 months, we lived in our perfect bubble of new parenthood. Daniel had taken paternity leave, and we spent our days learning Lucas's rhythms, marveling at his tiny fingers and toes, and falling deeper in love with our life together. I had never imagined that such simple contentment was possible. Our bubble burst on a Thursday afternoon when my phone started ringing incessantly while I was feeding Lucas. I had been gradually resuming contact with a few family members, mainly my Aunt Susan and Uncle Edward, who had always treated me with genuine affection. But these calls were from my parents and Rachel, and they kept coming every few minutes. I finally listened to one of the voicemails, and my mother's voice filled our quiet living room. Patricia Sarah posted a picture on Facebook of her visiting you and Daniel, and there's a baby in the background. Is that your baby? How could you not tell us we have a grandchild? Call me immediately. My heart sank as I realized what had happened. Sarah had visited the previous weekend to meet Lucas, and in her excitement she had posted a photo of herself holding him with the caption, "Meeting my godson." She had tagged our location, making it easy for anyone to figure out where we lived and that we had a baby. Within hours, my phone was full of voicemails, ranging from hurt confusion to outright anger. My parents demanded explanations. Rachel accused me of deliberately excluding her from important family moments, and various relatives weighed in with their opinions about my secrecy. But the messages that truly alarmed me came later that evening after my parents had apparently spent hours discussing the situation with Rachel and deciding on their course of action. The first message from my mother was bewildering. "Patricia, how dare you hide our grandson from us? We have rights as grandparents, and you have no legal authority to keep us from our own flesh and blood. Call us immediately, or we'll be forced to take action." The second message from my father was even more disturbing. "Sweetheart, we understand you're angry about the wedding situation, but using an innocent child as a weapon against your family is cruel and potentially illegal. Grandparents have visitation rights in California, and we won't hesitate to exercise them if you continue this vindictive behavior. But it was Rachel's message that truly shocked me into action. Patricia, I know you think you're punishing me by keeping Lucas away, but I need you to understand something important. I've been working with my therapist on my depression and my fears about never becoming a mother. And Dr. Peterson thinks that co-parenting Lucas could be incredibly healing for me. I've always wanted to be a mum, and this could be my chance to experience motherhood in a meaningful way. I know it's unconventional, but lots of families have non-traditional arrangements. Think about how much love Lucas would receive from having two mothers who adore him. I listened to that voicemail 3 times, certain I must have misunderstood something. My sister, who had never held a steady job, who lived with our parents, who had convinced them to cancel my wedding for her emotional well-being, was now suggesting that she should co-parent my infant son as therapy for her own mental health issues. The 4th message came from my mother again, clearly recorded, after she had spoken with Rachel. Honey, Rachel explained her idea about sharing Lucas and your father, and I think it makes perfect sense. She's your sister, she's his aunt, and she has so much love to give. You've always been independent and career-focused, so having extra help with childcare would benefit everyone. Rachel could move to San Diego and help you raise Lucas while she continues her art therapy work. It's a beautiful solution that would heal our whole family. Daniel found me sitting on our bedroom floor at midnight, holding Lucas, while tears streamed down my face. I played him the messages, watching his expression change from confusion to disbelief to pure fury. They want Rachel to co-parent our son, he said, his voice barely controlled. They think your sister should move to San Diego and help us raise Lucas as part of her therapy, and they're threatening legal action if I don't agree to it, I added. They think grandparents have automatic visitation rights. Daniel, whose own parents were loving but respectful people who lived in Chicago and called before visiting, couldn't comprehend the level of entitlement my family was displaying. Patricia, this is insane. Even if grandparents had rights, which I doubt they do, in this situation, they can't force you to let your sister co-parent your child. The messages continued for 3 days. My parents alternated between guilt trips and legal threats, while Rachel sent increasingly detailed plans about how the co-parenting arrangement would work. She had apparently researched apartments in San Diego, looked into art therapy programs at local hospitals, and even chosen a pediatrician who specialized in collaborative family care. On Friday morning, I received an email from my father that crossed every possible line. Patricia, your selfishness is damaging this family beyond repair. Rachel has been crying for 3 days because you won't even consider her proposal. She's finally found something that gives her hope and purpose, and you're destroying it out of spite. If you don't respond to us by Monday with a reasonable visitation schedule and consideration of Rachel's co-parenting request, we'll be contacting an attorney about our legal options. You're not the only one who can fight dirty. That's when I knew I needed professional help. Not therapy, though that would come later, but legal representation. My family had declared war on my autonomy as a parent, and I was going to defend my son and my marriage with everything I had. I found Beverly Thompson through a referral from Daniel's colleague, whose own divorce had involved complex custody issues. Beverly specialized in family law, particularly cases involving grandparent rights and parental autonomy. Her office was in downtown San Diego, and she agreed to see me that same afternoon. Beverly listened to my story without interruption, occasionally taking notes and asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and shook her head. Mrs. Rodriguez-Patterson, I want to be very clear about something. Your parents have no legal right to visitation with your son, and your sister has absolutely no standing to request co-parenting privileges. In California, grandparents can only petition for visitation if there's been a substantial pre-existing relationship with the child, or if the parents are unfit. Neither condition applies here, so they can't actually take me to court. They can try, but they'll lose quickly and pay substantial attorney fees in the process. More importantly, their threatening behavior and harassment could actually work against them if they do file any kind of petition. I'd like to send them a cease and desist letter immediately, and I want you to document every contact they make with you going forward. Beverly helped me understand that my family's threats were empty, but damaging, designed to manipulate me into compliance rather than achieve any legal victory. She also helped me see that their behavior was abusive, even if they framed it as love and concern. Has your family always made decisions for you and expected you to go along with them? She asked. Pretty much my entire life, I admitted. And when you've disagreed or asserted independence, how have they responded? I thought about the cancelled wedding, the guilt trips, the financial pressure, the constant expectation that I would sacrifice my needs for Rachel's comfort. They escalate until I give in. Well, this time you're not giving in and they're escalating to legal threats and emotional terrorism, but you have something now that you didn't have before, a family of your own to protect. Beverly was right. Lucas changed everything. This wasn't just about my relationship with my parents anymore. It was about protecting my son from the same dysfunctional patterns that had shaped my entire life. Beverly's cease and desist letter was delivered to my parents on a Wednesday morning, and their response revealed everything I needed to know about their true priorities. Instead of stepping back and reconsidering their approach, they escalated their campaign against me in ways I never could have imagined. My father called Beverly's office directly, demanding to speak with her about her interference in family matters. When she declined to take his call without my consent, he left a voicemail accusing her of encouraging family destruction for profit and threatening to report her to the State Bar Association for unethical practices. My mother took a different approach, calling my work number and sobbing to my assistant about how I was keeping her grandson hostage and begging for help in reaching me. When my assistant politely explained that she couldn't provide personal information, my mother accused her of being part of a conspiracy to isolate an innocent baby from his loving family. But it was Rachel's response that truly showed me how distorted their thinking had become. She created a Facebook post that went viral within our extended family and social circle. I'm heartbroken to share that my sister Patricia has cut our entire family off from her beautiful baby boy. We've tried everything to reconcile and build bridges, but she's chosen to use her son as a weapon against people who love her. I've been working with my therapist to heal from family trauma, and one of my treatment goals was to develop a meaningful relationship with my nephew. Patricia knows how much I've struggled with feeling left out and overlooked, and she's deliberately using my mental health challenges against me. I'm sharing this because I hope our friends and family will encourage her to choose love and forgiveness over anger and revenge. Baby Lucas deserves to know his extended family, and we deserve to be part of his life. The post received over 200 comments, mostly from people who didn't know the full story of my wedding or my family's history of dysfunction. Many comments supported Rachel, calling me selfish and urging me to put family first. And several of my cousins shared the post, adding their own commentary about the importance of family unity and forgiveness. But something unexpected happened. People who really knew me, who had witnessed my family's treatment of me over the years, began speaking up. My Aunt Susan, my father's sister, commented, "Rachel, this post is manipulative and hurtful. Patricia has every right to protect her family from harassment. Maybe it's time to look at why she felt the need to distance herself, instead of blaming her for the consequences of other people's actions." My Uncle Edward, my mother's brother, was even more direct. I've watched Patricia be overlooked and undervalued by this family for 30 years. She's a wonderful mother and wife who deserves respect, not guilt trips and legal threats. Rachel, your mental health is your responsibility, not Patricia's, and certainly not a baby's. Daniel's cousin Maria, who had attended our original poor wedding planning events, wrote, "For those who don't know the full story, Patricia's parents cancelled her wedding without permission to protect Rachel's feelings. Maybe consider that there's more to this situation than what's being shared here." The Facebook drama continued for days, with our extended family essentially taking sides in a conflict they only partially understood. I found it surreal to watch my personal life become entertainment for distant relatives who hadn't spoken to me in years, but felt qualified to judge my parenting decisions. More concerning than the social media battle were the escalating attempts at direct contact. My parents drove to San Diego twice, showing up at our house unannounced and demanding to see their grandson. The first time, Daniel answered the door and firmly told them to leave. The second time, they brought Rachel, who stood on our front porch crying loudly about how much she missed me and needed to meet Lucas for her emotional healing. I watched from our bedroom window as my sister performed her breakdown for the neighbours, wailing about family loyalty and mental health treatment, while my parents stood behind her, looking righteously indignant. It was like watching strangers, people I didn't recognise as the family who had raised me. The final straw came when my mother contacted Lucas's paediatrician's office, claiming to be calling on my behalf to schedule an appointment for her grandson's wellness check. When the receptionist asked for verification of her relationship to the patient, my mother became belligerent and demanded to speak with the doctor about a family emergency involving child welfare. Dr. Martinez called me immediately to report the incident and ask if I was safe. Mrs. Rodriguez-Patterson, the woman who called, was very aggressive and made some concerning statements about your fitness as a mother. I'm required to ask, do you feel that you or your baby are in any danger from this person? That's when I realised that my family's behaviour had crossed from manipulation into potential safety concerns. Beverly agreed, recommending that we document everything and consider filing for a restraining order if the harassment continued. They're not going to stop, Beverly explained during our meeting. In their minds, they're fighting for their rights and their family. They don't see their behaviour as harassment. They see it as necessary action to force you back into compliance with their expectations. 2 weeks after the Facebook incident, I received a certified letter that made everything crystal clear. My parents had indeed consulted with an attorney not to pursue visitation rights, but to explore whether they could petition for custody of Lucas based on claims that Daniel and I were mentally unstable and unfit parents. The letter from a family law attorney in Los Angeles outlined their concerns. My history of vindictive behaviour demonstrated by cutting off family contact my unstable mental state, evidenced by eloping without family support, and my neglect of the child's need for extended family relationships, shown by my refusal to allow grandparent visits. Beverly read the letter and laughed, which surprised me. "Patricia, this is actually good news. Their attorney is either incompetent or desperate, because these allegations are frivolous and potentially sanctionable. No judge would consider awarding custody to grandparents based on these complaints. But it does show us how far they're willing to go, which helps us craft our response." Our response was swift and decisive. Beverly filed a motion for a protective order against all 3 family members, documenting months of harassment threats and unwanted contact. She also sent a letter to their attorney explaining that any further frivolous filings would result in a motion for sanctions and attorney fees. But the most powerful part of our response was my own affidavit, detailing the pattern of emotional manipulation that had defined my relationship with my family for 32 years. Writing it all down, from childhood birthday parties cancelled for Rachel's convenience to my wedding, destroyed for her mental health, helped me see clearly how abnormal and damaging their behavior had always been. The protective order was granted on a temporary basis, requiring my parents and Rachel to stay at least 500 feet away from our home Daniel's workplace and Lucas's pediatrician's office. They were also prohibited from contacting us directly or through third parties, including social media posts that mentioned us by name. The judge's decision was swift and unambiguous. The court finds sufficient evidence of harassment and threatening behaviour to warrant protection for the petitioners and their minor child. The respondents' actions demonstrate a pattern of escalating inappropriate contact, despite clear requests to cease communication. My family's reaction to the restraining order revealed everything I needed to know about their true character. Instead of reflecting on their behaviour or seeking to understand why I felt the need for legal protection, they doubled down on their victimhood narrative. Rachel posted another Facebook update this time, claiming that I had weaponized the legal system against family members who only wanted to love Lucas. She shared a photo of herself holding a teddy bear she had bought for him, writing, "This is the only way I can show love to my nephew now, thanks to my sister's cruel heart." My mother called every mutual acquaintance we had, spinning a story about how she and my father were being persecuted by lawyers for the crime of wanting to see their grandchild. She conveniently omitted the details about threatening custody battles and demanding co-parenting arrangements. But the most telling response came from my father, who sent one final message through his attorney before the restraining order took full effect. Patricia has chosen lawyers over family strangers, over blood relatives. When she realizes what she's lost, it will be too late to repair the damage she's caused. The message revealed the fundamental difference in how we viewed the situation. In my father's mind, I was damaging the family by protecting myself and my son. In my mind, I was finally setting healthy boundaries after 32 years of emotional manipulation and control. The months following the restraining order were the most peaceful of my adult life. Lucas grew from an infant into a curious, happy baby who laughed at everything and charmed everyone he met. Daniel thrived in his position at the hospital and was invited to join a prestigious orthopedic practice as a partner. I expanded my consulting business, working with small businesses to develop sustainable financial strategies. We created our own traditions, hosting Thanksgiving dinner for Daniel's parents and siblings, celebrating Christmas morning in our own living room, and taking Lucas to the zoo every weekend to see the elephants that never failed to make him giggle. Our life was full of love and laughter, free from the drama and manipulation that had characterized my childhood. About 18 months after the restraining order was granted, I received an unexpected phone call from my Aunt Susan. She had maintained respectful distance during the legal proceedings, but she wanted me to know that my parents and Rachel were telling people I would come crawling back once I realized how much I needed their help with raising Lucas. "They don't think you can handle being a mother without family support," Susan explained gently. "They're waiting for you to fail so they can swoop in and save the day." I laughed, looking across our living room where Daniel was teaching 18-month-old Lucas to stack blocks while making exaggerated sound effects that sent our son into fits of giggles. "Aunt Susan, I've never been happier or more confident in my life. Lucas is thriving, my marriage is strong, and I wake up every day grateful for the peace we've built." "I can hear it in your voice," she said. "You sound like yourself again, like the confident young woman you were before you started doubting yourself constantly." Susan's observation helped me realize how much I had changed since setting boundaries with my family. I no longer questioned my decisions constantly or sought approval for basic life choices. I trusted my instincts as a mother, supported my husband's career goals without guilt, and built friendships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. 2 years after Lucas's birth, Daniel and I decided we were ready for another child. Our daughter Elena was born on a sunny October morning, and holding her in my arms felt like completing a circle of healing that had begun in that Bali beach ceremony years earlier. I sometimes wondered what my life would have looked like if I had continued accepting my family's treatment, if I had allowed Rachel to move to San Diego and insert herself into my marriage and parenting. I imagined holidays spent managing her emotions, weekends devoted to her art therapy sessions, and my children growing up believing that love required constant sacrifice of their own needs. Instead, my children are growing up in a home where their feelings matter, where they're encouraged to express their opinions, and where they'll never be asked to diminish themselves to accommodate someone else's dysfunction. They'll learn that love includes boundaries, that family isn't an excuse for mistreatment, and that they have the right to choose relationships that bring joy rather than obligation. The legal case officially ended when my parents and Rachel chose not to contest the permanent restraining order. Their attorney explained that pursuing the matter further would likely result in financial sanctions and could potentially lead to criminal charges for continued harassment. But more than the legal victory, I found peace in finally understanding that I couldn't control other people's choices, only my own responses to them. My parents and Rachel could spend the rest of their lives believing they were victims of my selfishness, or they could choose to examine their own behaviour and work toward genuine change. Either way, it was no longer my responsibility to manage their emotions or sacrifice my family's well-being for their comfort. Dr. Sarah Chen, the therapist I began seeing after Elena's birth, helped me understand that breaking cycles of dysfunction often requires what feels like cruel choices to people who benefit from the dysfunction. Your family system required you to be smaller than you really are, she explained. When you chose to be your full self, the system couldn't accommodate you anymore. Looking back, I can see that every major decision I made, from eloping to Bali, to moving to San Diego, to seeking legal protection, was about reclaiming my right to live authentically. I learned that family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about love, respect, and the choice to treat each other with kindness and dignity. My children will grow up knowing that they are unconditionally loved, that their dreams and feelings matter, and that they never have to earn affection by sacrificing their own well-being. They'll learn that healthy relationships require mutual respect, that love doesn't demand constant compromise of personal values, and that sometimes the greatest act of love is having the courage to walk away from people who consistently choose to hurt you. Today, when I watch Lucas teaching his little sister to throw a ball in our backyard while Daniel tends to the vegetable garden we planted together, I know with absolute certainty that I made the right choice. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give your children is the example of parents who refuse to accept mistreatment, who choose healing over habit, and who build their lives on love rather than obligation. I learned that you can't save people who don't want to be saved, and you can't change people who don't believe they need to change. But you can always choose to save yourself, and sometimes that choice creates space for others to choose healing too. Whether my parents and Rachel ever make that choice isn't up to me anymore, and that freedom is the greatest gift I've ever given myself. What would you do if your family demanded you share your baby with someone else for their emotional healing? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and protecting your own children? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video if it resonated with your own experiences. Subscribe for more stories about setting boundaries and choosing your own happiness, and share this with anyone who needs to hear that they have the right to protect their peace. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that you always have the power to choose love over obligation, healing over habit, and your own authentic life over other people's expectations. I wish you all the courage to make the choices that honor your own truth.